A gentle mist rises from the Potomac River as the sun breaks over Mount Vernon. Here on these grounds walked a man who would become more than just America's first president. He would become its defining symbol. But before he was General Washington, before he was President Washington, he was simply George, a young surveyor trudging through the wilderness of Virginia's frontier. At just 16 years old, Washington was already mapping the untamed Shenandoah Valley, learning lessons about leadership and self-reliance that would serve him for a lifetime. By 22, he found himself at the center of a global conflict. The year was 1754, and Washington's actions in the Pennsylvania wilderness would help spark the French and Indian War. After a disastrous defeat at Fort Necessity, he wrote to his brother, "I heard the bullets whistle, and believe me, there is something charming in the sound." It would be the last time he romanticized warfare. Those early failures shaped him into the leader who would later stand firm through the darkest days of the American Revolution. At Valley Forge, where the Continental Army faced its greatest test, Washington didn't just lead from a distance. He shared his men's hardships, sleeping in the same conditions, facing the same bitter cold that claimed the lives of 2,000 of his soldiers. But there was another Washington, one hidden from the public eye. His personal letters reveal a man constantly wrestling with self-doubt, yet driven by an unshakable sense of duty.
I am now set down to write to you on a subject which fills me with inexpressible concern.
The presidency wasn't a position he sought. It was a burden he accepted. At heart, Washington considered himself a farmer first. He revolutionized agricultural practices at Mount Vernon, experimenting with crop rotation and fertilization techniques that were ahead of their time. His detailed daily journals show a man obsessed with improvement, whether it was the yield of his fields or the strength of a young nation. Yet Washington's story cannot be told without acknowledging its contradictions. The man who fought for liberty was himself a slaveholder. Though he would eventually free his slaves in his will, this paradox haunted him.
There is not a man living who wishes more sincerely than I do to see a plan adopted for the abolition of slavery.
When the Constitutional Convention threatened to fall apart in 1787, it was Washington's presence that held it together. Though he spoke rarely during the proceedings, his silent authority kept the fractious delegates focused on their momentous task.
I have often looked at that behind the president without being able to tell whether it was rising or setting. But now I know that it is a rising sun.
As president, Washington set precedents that would shape the republic for centuries to come.
Please call me Mr. President.
He insisted on being called simply Mr. President rather than Your Excellency. He established the cabinet system, creating a model for executive leadership that endures today. Perhaps most importantly, he walked away after 2 terms, setting a precedent for the peaceful transfer of power that would define American democracy. In his final years, Washington returned to his beloved Mount Vernon. On December 12, 1799, he rode out to inspect his farms in cold, wet weather. The next day, he developed a severe throat infection. By December 14th, the man who had survived revolution, warfare, and the challenges of building a nation succumbed to what was likely acute bacterial epiglottitis. By December 14th, the man who had survived revolution, warfare, and the challenges of building a nation succumbed to what was likely acute bacterial epiglottitis. Today, Washington's legacy lives on not just in monuments and textbooks, but in the very fabric of American democracy. His greatest achievement wasn't winning independence or serving as president. It was showing how power could be held and then willingly relinquished for the greater good. As the sun sets over Mount Vernon, we're reminded that Washington wasn't just the father of his country. He was a human being who faced doubt, made mistakes, and ultimately chose duty over personal ambition. In his farewell address, he warned against excessive party spirit and foreign entanglements, wisdom that resonates even now. The sun that Benjamin Franklin saw rising in Philadelphia continues to illuminate our path forward. Washington's legacy reminds us that greatness lies not in never failing, but in rising every time we fall, and that true leadership means putting the needs of the nation above personal gain. In his final letter, Washington wrote, "I die hard, but I am not afraid to go." He left behind not just a nation, but a template for leadership that would inspire generations to come. In the end, perhaps that was his greatest victory of all.